It's my pleasure to have distinguished panelists to discuss university industry partnerships and collaborations on AI research. So we budgeted 45 minutes for this panel, and then I'll try to manage time as much as possible. So in the interest of time, I'm going to make a very quick introduction of panelists. Otherwise, it will take 10 minutes to introduce these distinguished people. But so sitting next to me, Jeff Walpole brings 30 years of experience in IT, digital marketing, software development. In his role as CEO, he sets vision, focus, direction for phase 2, a successful high-growth technology partner. Jeff serves on 2 advisory boards for the AU Koga School of Business and previously served for 6 years on the board of the Drupal Association. He's a thought leader on AI and open source innovation, and he manages industry-specific consulting practices, digital health, and product development. Thank you. Thank you. Next to him is Lawrence Fitzpatrick, is Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer of OneMain Financial, where he leads technology strategy, oversees the delivery of innovative digital capabilities, and ensures the reliability and security of core systems and infrastructure to support the company's growth. He joined OneMain in 2020 after serving at Amazon Web Services, where he designed the technical services for the financial industry. With more than 30 years of experience, Larry has held leadership roles, including CTO of software product companies, president of systems integrator, and senior executive in corporate IT and R&D. He serves on the board of AU Koga School of Business Digital Business Executive Committee. Thank you for joining us. Yes. Next to him is Min Nguyen. He is the tech lead in Deloitte, Privacy Enhancing Technologies R&D group, specializing in solutions at the intersection of confidential federated computing and large language models. He serves as the tech lead for Cancer AI Alliance, CAIA, where he led the technical design and implementation of a federated learning platform empowering 4 cancer centers to enable secure multi-institutional model training. His work with the CAIA has led to 8 active multi-institutional research projects focusing on complex oncological challenges. He is a proven innovator, building AI-powered solutions for fraud detection, risk assessment, and complex multimodal workflow automation across diverse cloud platforms. He has also conducted extensive research in computer vision, developing AI applications for geospatial intelligence, surveillance systems, and the detection of generative AI content. Thank you for being here. And then last but not least, Dan Channock is Executive Director of IBM Center for the Business of Government. He oversees all of the center's activities in connecting research to practice to benefit government, and has written and spoken extensively around government technology, cybersecurity, privacy regulation, budget acquisition, and presidential transitions. Dan also serves in numerous industry leadership positions. He is a CIO SAGE with a Partnership for Public Service, Fellow of the Board of Directors, and member of the National Academy of Public Administration, member of the Board of Directors for the Senior Executive Association, member of the GAO, Polaris Advisory Council for Science and Technology, and member of AU Koga School's Executive Council. As a former government executive, Dan serves as branch chief for information policy and technology at the Office of Management and Budget, where he oversaw federal information and IT policy. So thank you for being here. Appreciate it. So I prepared a few questions for the panelists, and then we want to make sure that we leave at least 15 minutes for you guys to have an opportunity to ask questions to the panelists. So I'm going to start with questions about AI challenges. So from your vantage point, what are the grand challenge AI problems your organization is tackling today? And where do you see the biggest gaps that academia could help address? So I'll start with Jeff.
Sure. I don't know if we're solving the grand challenges of AI at my company. We're trying to figure it out just like everyone else. But I think for us, there's sort of a couple levels that we're working on. One is, like everyone else, we're trying to figure out how to use AI better within our organization to be more effective, more efficient, rework and redesign everything that we do in the age of AI. And that's sort of just a baseline, I think, for everyone today. But in our client work, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to take the power of all this technology and capability that's being deployed right now and get it that last mile. So we're not building LLMs, we're not innovating in that sense, but we are trying to get things into production. And that's kind of a different challenge. It's largely a human challenge, it's an integration challenge. So what we deal with a lot is the challenges of how do we ensure that there's governance, compliance, security, and things like that when we're deploying very powerful models. And that's really where I'm hoping that the research aspect of this goes as well.
Great, thank you. Larry?
So our business runs on conversations with our customers, and AI has proven to be unreasonably effective at having conversations. Today, we have a pretty massive machine that trains humans how to have those conversations, and training has a huge marginal cost for our company. We have 20 to 30% turnover a year, 6 months to productivity, a year to proficiency, close to 10,000 people doing this, so it's a huge load. So the challenge really is how do we exploit the AI language proficiency in driving the marginal cost to zero, which turns into the challenge we're looking for help with, which is how do we manage the risk of that? One of the ways I like to frame that is we've had about 50,000 years to figure out how to get swarms of crazy, unpredictable humans, how to behave in a roughly normal way where we're comfortable with it. We have employment law, we have training, we have peer pressure, incentive structures, compensation, pride of ownership. We can tap into all of these things. We don't have any of that with language models. So what is going to substitute for building the comfort we have that we're operating in sort of a safe zone at scale, right? And I think some of that is the world getting used to it, but I also think a lot of it gets to how do we build the evaluation constructs around that have some reasonable proof of confidence that we're operating in a good and respectable way.
Thank you. Min?
Yeah. So I do a lot of research in privacy enhancing technology, and a lot of it is some of the challenge I've been seeing as you work closely with the actual model, and you focusing on different layer of the gradient and different from training to deployment to monitoring and all these things. I think it gets what I'm noticing is it gets really hard to protect the individual, right? That are being used, or the data sets are being used to train these models. So a lot of the thing that we focus on is how do we add in noises, how do we add in encryption, how do we add certain layer of things to protect the individual level, right? Like everyone here. And so the biggest challenge for me is from the model layer, how do you have it fully secure to protect individual? But then from the system layer, how do you have that system secure from your internal developers as well, right? Because you kind of have to look at it as a layer approach, right? There's the data layer, there's a API layer, and there's the individual raw data layer, and so I think the challenge is just really hard to kind of how do you protect everything at once, right? So. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Guan-Hu. Thank you for organizing the panel. Great to be with this group and to be here today. So I run IBM's, essentially our think tank that we do research on, and we work with academic partners, actually Guan-Hu's written for us in the past, on topics of interest to government leaders in the US and around the world. I also am an IBM executive, so I can talk about IBM's approach, but I'm gonna speak in my day job hat for purpose of the initial panel and Q&A. Happy to get into more. We're seeing sort of, if you think about the government as an industry or an industry sector that we're trying to support, there's a lot of interest in AI to improve the experience of all of us as we deal with the government, whether it's a veteran trying to get a benefit or an elderly individual trying to access Social Security or Medicaid. those government programs are fraught with bureaucratic hurdles and obstacles, and AI can create a great use case following private sector best practice to deliver a personalized experience in that kind of tier 0 self-help desk before you need to kind of a smaller subset of issues where you go to a person. At the same time, the government's dealing with a lot of people that are not so technologically available, so there needs to be a multimodal channel. So it's also how do you use AI in a mixed mode where you've got individuals or people or even small businesses who aren't necessarily wanting to come to you in that online setting. The other big issue, and this is something that the current administration has focused on a lot in the news, as have past administration, is around operational efficiency and effectiveness. It's no secret that we have a large budget deficit. The government at the federal level and many state governments struggle to meet their obligations, and so AI can be basically a force multiplier to enable the workforce to deliver more with less. And how do you kind of create a workforce that can leverage AI to deliver at scale at a reduced cost? We actually did a paper just a couple of months ago by a scholar at Georgia State University on GenAI and the future of work in government. And so how do you create at the task level and then the job level the conditions to train and bring in and recruit for people that can deliver in this matter. And the last thing I'd say is I'll double down on the cybersecurity piece. There are adversaries all over that are, whether it's a company or a government, that are trying to do harm all the time, every day, to the AI models that are being developed and the infrastructure and applications that kind of deliver the AI capability. And so thinking about building cyber in from the beginning and doing research on how that's best done in different settings, I think is a critical need and will get even more important as we start talking about agentic AI and more complex forms as the AI evolves into more complex supply chain scenarios.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So my next question for the panel is regarding aligning industry needs and academic strengths. So it has two parts. The first part of the question is what kinds of academic research create the most tangible value for industry? And the second part is conversely, where do misalignments persist between academic incentives focusing on publication and theory building and industry imperatives such as speed and scalability? So feel free to jump in. So maybe we can start with Dan, the reverse
Sure,
direction.
we'll go this way.
Okay, sure.
So I would say that the first academic strength is one who, anytime you write a paper for us, it's a strong paper. So I'll start there. I think that we have about on our website over 15 reports over the last, let's say, I think 8 or 9 years on AI and different aspects of government, whether that's fraud reduction or tax modernization or procurement reform. And so from our perspective, we're looking for sort of how do you turn technology into practical results that matter for the agencies that we're working with. So if you think about sort of taking it from the point of the actual development of the algorithm and the LLM to how do you enable decision makers and staff who aren't necessarily prompt engineers or are deeply steeped in it, how do you enable them to use this technology in a way that's helpful to their constituents? So that's probably our number one that we look for in terms of research. And I can go into a little more detail a little later on. I would say in terms of misalignment for us, it's oftentimes when we get academic proposals and we have a research program. Actually, we have a call for papers out right now. If you go to businessofgovernment.org and you're a researcher, you can read about our program. Oftentimes we'll get papers that are very scholarly, very data-oriented. Our audience are government leaders and the people that work with government leaders, state contractors. We get read by the media. Our papers are often used in university settings and academic settings. We're on many syllabi. So we are always looking for how do you take, similar to what I said before from a practitioner perspective, from a research perspective, we're looking for papers that can enable practitioners to do their job better with a very strong empirical base. So think of what we're looking for as a scholarly paper that you might write for a journal, maybe not as many footnotes, with practical, actionable recommendations that you might see in like a traditional DC think tank paper. For us, it's got to have both pieces.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So what I would say, the biggest strength that I've been noticing in at least with academia, is the empirical research, right? Everything it follows a step. Oops, sorry. So everything there's actually, there's certain steps that you have to go through, right? You can't just write a white paper. Like in the industry, sometimes what you do is you write a white paper and you prove people that, hey, I know the topic. But in research, in actual research in academia, you have to benchmark, you have to show your experiments, you have to show your result, you have to actually even talk about why your research is, might not be good, right? What are the future steps that are missing? What are things that you didn't do in this research that you could do in the next research? So I think a lot of these things provide, like a lot of these research papers, because I read a lot of research paper for work, and that's like part of my research lab. One of the biggest benefits for me when I read these papers is that I understand the gaps, right? I read through these things, I'm like, okay, so this is a really cool idea, and this one is also nice, but there are gaps on both of them. So how do we, as a like a team, we combine these things to maybe cover all these gaps or address what we can? So the biggest strength, again, like it comes down to just a lot of really empirical, detailed research and explaining the gaps and just holistic picture of the topic. In terms of like the misalignment, it also kind of similar in the same vein, right? In the sense where it becomes so empirical that sometimes I notice researchers do miss out like deployment, like in terms of like scalability, right? So a lot of papers that come in, and I wouldn't say it's just naturally the data sets that are free or data sets that are available for researcher aren't always a real data set. So a lot of time models and AI systems that we build, they're good for research, but then in the wild, the data sets aren't perfect. They're going to be a lot of noises, a lot of biases here and there. So then the alignment is how do you convert your really awesome research into the wild and have it working in random data set and misalignment of data set, and sometimes even like for some basic things as like integer, but then on the wild, everything comes in as float, but then sometimes comes in as string, or like, it's just basic stuff. So the data set is probably like the biggest misalignment. So I think if there's a way where we can like help provide data set or vice versa, like we both work together to have some kind of data set that both can use, I think that would be pretty useful. So.
Thank you. And then Larry?
I think in a phrase, the one strength you bring is the ability to inform policy. There's no, looking at the conversations, presentations earlier and presumably this afternoon, it's very, very clear that as academics, you're almost uniquely qualified, like as a group, to be able to reason about this stuff effectively, like what its strengths and weaknesses are, how you should use it, how you should position against it, what you should look for. And yet there's a gap in the wide world. I'm in a public company in terms of, people who form policy generally lag knowledge by a pretty wide margin, maybe a decade. And so if there's anything that you can do to sort of like close the gap on policy formation, and then in terms of misalignment, which may be related to policy formation, but it's certainly related to the consumption of information in a public company setting, is very similar to what Dan said, is you guys don't write in a way that we consume information. And so I would go to, I think AU is better than most academic institutions in that sense, and I give some examples. Dean Marchek is getting a lot of press. Like, if people read about what you're doing in the Wall Street Journal in my company, then that has value, right? And so to Dan's point, like you got to do both. You got to do your academic stuff, and then you got to find a way to transition or translate it into the consumption side where it might actually make a difference and get some uptake. And I know that's a slippery slope with academics because you're always looking at like, well, we're just, tooting our own horn, or we're making wild exaggerations about what we found and so forth. But I don't think that's true. I think there's real findings in what you're doing, and it can be consumable in more approachable bits for people who don't read the academic literature.
Thank you. That reminds me of, so there is a academia management, a while ago, the president invited a bunch of practitioners to academic management annual meeting, and then got feedback from them, asked them, what do you think about those papers? And one of the feedback was, you guys speak weird language. Yeah. Anyway, so Jeff?
Yeah. So I think I'll start with the gaps. I mean, I think, obviously there's a time gap, right, between the speed at which AI is moving and the speed of research, right? And that's just kind of obvious. But I think it's a solvable problem. I think there's lots of ways to make that go faster. I think, like, for me, the interesting part is there is a misalignment, I think, traditionally between research feeling like it needs to be about novelty and incentivizes novelty. And in the age of AI, we have this really interesting, I think, just moment where, because of these large language labs are moving at such an incredible clip already, and the innovation is happening both open source, globally. We talked about this before, like there's just so much of this happening at lightning speed. That's not the hole that research needs to fill. And then, as I said earlier, my company's really focused on the deployment side, and that's starting to speed up too. We're starting to see companies want to put this stuff into action. Organizations, we work with large healthcare systems, and they want to start put this stuff out there. The gap in between is where I think that the academic research could be very valuable, because while it's not the most novel aspects of it, it's not the inventing the next model. It's okay, how are we going to create governance structures and study those so that when people are moving fast to implement these, that there's best practices and there's research that supports how that's going to work? Because I don't think the large language labs are doing that, because they're moving too fast on the innovation side. And I don't think those of us that are out there trying to implement this stuff have either the skill set or the time and determination to go back and study these things in great detail. So I think, again, maybe it's boring, but governance, compliance, security, adoption, and in the business setting, even just, the ROI, right? So we're all struggling with, sort of what's the new ROI model look like for AI. So I think at least from a business research perspective, those are areas that I think could be very valuable in bridging the gap between the really fast innovation pace and the really fast pace of deployment and rollout.
Thank you. So when you submit a paper to a journal, and then one of the criteria that the reviewers use is, is this research question interesting and novel theoretically? But then what you're saying is there are a lot of mundane problems that need to be addressed, right, through rigorous research as well. So excellent point. So my next question, maybe last question before we open up the floor, is about the collaboration options. So beyond just sponsorship or grants, what forms of engagement do you find to be productive and mutually beneficial for academics and also industry? For example, some options share the data sets and open source tools, and supervised projects or visiting researcher programs. So what are the kind of creative ways of collaborating between industry and then academia, just go beyond just grants and then the sponsorship? Feel free to jump in, no order particular, but anybody who wants to start?
Go ahead. So this conference is a good example of one modality, so that we can get together and talk about things in different settings. I would say we do a lot of small roundtables where we bring in academic experts, industry experts, and government leaders to kind of co-create a problem definition and then a strategy to go forward. We've had several. I was just talking to a gentleman here earlier about this. We're doing a number on sort of AI in different spaces in government. How do you scale innovation? How do you apply AI to HR reform? How do you apply AI to supply chain management? And those types of methodologies, those collaborative roundtables where experts who don't normally get together, you often get a 2 + 2 = 6 or 7, not just 5, if you kind of create this kind of learning back and forth. And then also we've done some work around co-creation of prototypes, where we'll bring together, we actually have a design studio at our office in DC, and we bring together people, and a lot of companies are doing similar types of engagements where we bring together and we say, all right, here's the problem that we're facing. How do we actually develop a prototype to work that? And then the work with the other side of the house, like in my case, IBM, Deloitte, I'm sure has similar models. How do you then take those prototypes and then put them into sort of scale in terms of business offerings? So co-creation roundtables, 2 great modalities to bring researchers and practitioners together.
I'll jump in. I think the opportunities, and I've been doing collaborations with the university since I got out of grad school, every company, and I've tried everything, right? From recruiting pipelines to internships to projects to consults, and even the conferences, and been involved in conference preparation, so forth. You know, I think at the end of the day, it boils down to, can we match expertise against a problem that requires some sort of like longer term thinking, not just the, as Jeff said, the reacting to like get the next thing out the door, but we really need to take some deep consideration around that. And I think when you start thinking about it that way, you got to ask what's in it for each party. And I think, you know, emphasizing what Min said, we have real world data, right? I know you guys don't have it.
Yeah.
And you'd love access to it, right? But in exchange for that, what we want is guidance, right? We want some way to say, hey, you know, there's a fork in the road, right? Maybe there's 4 directions you can go, you know, as one of the papers earlier, bet on the middle one. I don't know, you know, but pick a path, right? Your probability of going down this path is better. It's like, you know, so I kind of think of you guys, the collaborations, as kind of like providing some headlights that let us see a little bit further down the road than we're normally used to seeing, but you have to find the right problems where that match of expertise and problem come together.
Yeah, I'll throw in something else. So I agree with all those. I think one of the things that I see a lot of potential for also is open source. You talked about that, and I think that's something that we've always been passionate about, because I think it's an opportunity to co-build things with, you know, both universities in an academic setting, but then also have tools that are shared with industry so that you're collaborating through the open source process itself, which is co-creation, but then also co-owning things that could be useful to the community. So I think that's an area that would be really interesting, and it's very aligned with the data set side of it too, because a data set is just basically the data version of an open source, you know, capability. And so like Larry said, you know, we have data sets, we have real world problems. We don't have researchers and we don't have R&D funding. At least we don't. Some of you do. So I think that's the logical place I see. You know, I think those 2 areas are for us are you know, probably the most promising.
Wonderful.
The one thing I will add is, so there was, I was in one of these conferences last year, and this person said that prototyping of yesterday is like what, 3 months, 4 months out. Yeah. Prototyping of today is like a week out, maybe even 2 days out, right?
A day, yeah.
Yeah, a day even, right? And you know, so it's like the speed of it is so fast, but but because of that, it actually quite powerful where these hackathons are actually meaningful, right?
Yeah.
So what I noticed is that a lot of organizations, startup, all the way to, you know, big company like Deloitte and et cetera, they would host a hackathon with researchers from different you know, university. And within those hackathons, something actually come out from them, like every now and then, right? There'll be an actual product, an actual software. So I think having, you know, some kind of, you know, hackathons or, you know, organizational events or competition of sort could actually, you know, unite both sides, like you know, the goods from both sides to then actually solve a real world problem. So I think something like that might be pretty nice.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. So obviously there are a lot of opportunities for industry-university collaboration, but also there are barriers and challenges for that. For example, for my Washington Post study, so that project involved AU, Boston University, UT Dallas, and the Hong Kong University of Science and Tech, and then Washington Post. The 5 organizations took 6 months to agree on NDA. So there was an interesting experience. But now I'd like to open up the floor for your questions. So my assistant has a microphone. So in order, we are recording all the sessions. So in order to be recorded, even if you can speak loudly, but I would like you to use microphone for your questions. So first question. Okay, go ahead.
Yes. So I was wondering whether one area of academic industry collaboration might be where we provide professional development opportunities for your employees to maybe come here for a weekend or 2 days to do a workshop, maybe on AI ethics, regulation, things like that.
I would say absolutely yes. I think one of the questions, Guan, who didn't get to was around, you know, the future and where this goes and what you guys could be part of. And I think continuous learning is part of that. I think that's amen to that.
Yep. Plus.
The one thing I'll add to that too is actually even like for big companies, we do actually try to meet up with other organizations just to host workshops just for the pure purpose of learning. So I think a university setting would be actually a perfect place for it. Yeah.
I agree. It's also bidirectional. We have a global skills curriculum that's publicly available. It's open source. So we can think about how can our employees learn from you and the research you're doing, but you can think about maybe your students coming in and taking advantage of our capabilities as well.
Great.
Hi, I work at Phase 2, so this isn't for Jeff. But I've had the privilege of working at several universities. I now work at Phase 2. And I think that when it comes to being more efficient, using AI internally to do your job better, we kind of talked about it a little bit through some of the paper sessions. Do universities currently, are they blocked by security and compliance, locked down ecosystems and infrastructures? And if so, I kind of face the same thing. And so my mantra at Phase 2 is to open everything up for innovation, because adoption really is key for us when we're trying to bring client solutions and everything that we're doing there. So at least at Phase 2, one of my jobs is to privacy and security, compliance, governance. Currently, my mantra is open things up so everybody can use it. We'll then figure out like the best way to make things secure along the way. I don't know if universities face that now, where things are locked down by IT departments and everything. But what would you say? What's a good balance on opening things up, everything's open, versus everything's shut down, everything's locked?
I will say in the public company setting, the number one concern of the CISO and the CTO is data loss prevention. And so the answer is no. I mean, that's just the reality. We've got to get some control around it.
So I think there's the data issue, and then there's the development issue. Like, we're very much a champion of open source development and orchestration across an ecosystem of partners, and university researchers can definitely play a role in that. Once you get into the proprietary data, then that's where you get into the lockdowns and the point about, we have data sets that you would like. But the development side, I think, let's encourage more open source collaboration. I wrote a paper maybe 15 years ago on open, secure government. Like it's not an oxymoron. That was the title.
Yeah, so in a perfect world, I think open source is the way to go. Right? I'm fully technical. I love building things. I love sharing things that I learn. But I think in the world we live in, it's not quite the way to go, right? Because let's say if you open source. So actually, there's a paper that launched like a few years ago, Gemini. And actually, I don't want to call it any company. But anyway, actually, let's go back. So a model was released, right? And with sophistication of mathematics, you can reverse engineer and you know exactly the data set that was used to train that model, right? So I think maybe 5-10 years from now, if we open source everything, there has to be some, like convention of like how should you train a model? How should you protect the individual data sets or individual data that goes into these data sets? I think once we achieve that, then yeah, open source is great because why not, right? We should share the model to individual. Why keep it from the mass, right? Why keep it just for the few? Then you kind of stump down innovation, right? So.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question.
Hi, I have a question for Dan. And I read a news article last week saying that IBM is tripling the number of Gen Z entry-level jobs after finding the limitation of AI adoption. And this is very different from what we see from other IT companies. So I would like to know if you have any insights for this. Thank you.
Come on in, the water's fine. Obviously AI is reshaping the nature of work and how we put that together. But the skills around how to apply AI to customer settings, and I'm not an IBM HR professional, so I can't speak for the company, just kind of my observation, are such that you really need to develop a cadre of experts that have domain expertise as well as understand how to basically build and share and build algorithms in an open setting and then apply them to customer set focus. And if you rely on people that are 10, 15 years into their career, that's harder to train. Also, part of the benefit of this is that because we have such a big ecosystem of partners, a lot of times that when IBM hires people and trains them, maybe they'll spend a few years with us, a few years elsewhere, and they'll come back. There are lots of people who go back and forth between big companies like Deloitte, IBM, and Accenture. So the more we can do to create an industry ecosystem of experts and do that at the entry level, the better it'll be for us in the long term.
Interesting. Yep, please.
We've been discussing about the really collaboration between industry and academia, and I'd like to ask a specific field in academia. For example, I'm a philosopher, and there are a number of people in philosophy who are working on AI ethics. But then given this real fast development in AI industry, and humanities and philosophy is like a slow cooker. And I am wondering, how serious is this issue, AI ethics, to those people in industry? If to think about ethics more in depth and nuanced way, and if it is a serious issue, one might be the ways that the philosophers who are working on AI ethics can make a contribution and collaborate with people in industry.
I seem to be going first. So I was in a meeting, a roundtable last week, where they talked to, I think I raised Hegel, Aristotle was brought up. So it was very, down, you would have been very comfortable in that setting. I think that we have, and many companies have, like AI ethics leaders. We have a global AI ethics leader who I work with very closely, whose job it is to make sure that we're thinking about responsible use in development and application and in sales and every step of the way. So thinking, we wouldn't necessarily call it a philosopher's view, but it is a view of responsible AI. We have an AI ethics board, a global AI ethics board that reviews all of our new development to make sure it's meeting responsible standards that are kind of consistent with the OECD standards that have been spread around the world for general responsible use. You might look more at the OECD.ai website they have some great information there. But I know that many companies have similar programs. It's core to our trust with our customers is to being able to demonstrate that we have a governance process that brings in ethics into everything we do.
You raised a really interesting question, and I don't have a direct answer for you. But echoing what Dan just said, ethics is important. Companies wrestling with AI now are not really sure where the boundaries are. We don't know what's acceptable and what's not. And having some guidance around informing what might be a reasonable decision, if you go down a path and say, we're going to release this into this use case or task, and we justified it based on the grounds that we did some deep thinking about it, and it seems like an ethical thing to do, maybe a way to inoculate oneself and create that it's safe aspect that I referred to earlier. I think the challenge is maybe, and I'd be interested in an offline conversation, is like, how do you sell what you have to offer into that conversation? So how do you bring value into it, right? And I think that's a unknown for me, and I'd be interested in exploring it.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the industry that we work a lot in is healthcare, and that's the area where I see the largest conflict between the power of AI and what it can do to free up what is really a shortage of clinicians all over. Nurses, doctors don't have enough time. They spend their time keying in stuff into EHRs. There's a lot of potential for AI in the clinical side of healthcare. But it also is the biggest conflict from an ethics perspective. Bias trained in models, or just unresponsible AI, right? Usage can lead to pretty significant consequences. So same thing there. There's a ton of oversight. I think the only thing slowing down AI in healthcare, as far as we can see, is the need to make it responsible. And so those committees will slow things down, and sometimes unnecessarily, sometimes legitimately, but just to ensure that they're not introducing risk into the clinical process.
My question is, I guess we'll start with Dan and Larry because of something you said during the panel. So in my decades of being a professor of business, we've been frustrated by the distance between us academics and practice. And one of them that you touched on is the translation of our studies as academics to the business world. Let me make a kind of a rhetorical point on that. Now that we're in the age of GenAI, the ability to translate anything we do, and even into a podcast by LLM, is very easy. So do you have any evidence that now you are seeing more from universities? And speculate a little bit about what's going to happen in the next few years.
I'll jump in to give DM time to think, although he seems pretty good on his feet, I got to tell you. If only I could aspire to that. My words are buying time. I do think with the rise of resources like Archive and other places where you get early access to certain research and the ability to process it, that I see a lot more academic findings reported in the kind of media that that business consumers read. And so I definitely think the down translation has gotten a heck of a lot more accelerated. I do think there's still a gap, which is contextualizing that against the situation that each business finds itself in. And I think that gap can be solved with personal relationships with researchers who over time get to know what you're about and find that common ground where you can collaborate.
Yeah, I fully support Larry, and thank you for the time. Eran, I think it's a great question. I think that a lot of the research that we fund, we know that the researchers are using AI as a research assistant type tool to gather information, and then we're seeing drafts. Sometimes we're seeing drafts that rely too much on AI for the writing, and we can kind of tell when that happens, as I'm sure you can with your classes. And so the question I think Larry raises a great point is, how do you then tailor the research? And you really need domain expertise. You need to know the agency or the company's mission, purpose, their current priority set, the larger context, and in the government case of this administration has a very different set of issues they're dealing with in the last one. The next one will have another one. That's the way the government works. And so how do you kind of tune the research to be cognizant of the issues and context of the day when most of the models are dealing at a much kind of lower level? That really requires human judgment, and the strong research that we receive takes that into account.
I just want to add one more thing. So what I'm noticing is basically with the introduction of AI recent year, we're now in almost like a K economy, right? But in knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're good and you're smart and you put a lot of effort in, you excel really fast. Yeah. And if you decide to kind of go, well, AI, I'm skeptical, I don't want to use it, tool might not be good, you're kind of slowly being left behind. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, the danger of it is that most people are using it so fast that they're not actually reading it and becoming the expert that the AI economy is setting them up to. So then you get snobs content, right? Like what you're saying, where summarize, they're using AI to write stuff. You can see it. You can see in especially in programming, if someone produce codes in AI, almost 90% of the time I look at it, I know right away, automatically. And so those things it's one of those things where if you use it correctly, you advance. If you don't, then you're kind of using it just to take a quick win, right? But there is no quick win in these things, right?
So that's really interesting that, because we hear so much about AI as code, mm-hmm. and your experience as an expert is that you can identify that. So we hear about, AI is really good for the basic level, but when you get more advanced.
Yeah, I think a lot of time what I been doing is that when someone produces code and I kind of suspect that it might be AI generated, I typically my question is always explain this logic to me, right? And then they explain the logic, and I go, great, but now what if we do this instead? Because I think once you get to the second, third layer, that's where you can tell where what's the true knowledge, right? I think what AI really brought out for us is almost like what I was saying with the K economy, right? We're in the era of SME experts, right? You want to be an expert. You don't need to be the best coder. You just need to be an expert in a field. So philosopher, an expert in philosophy, will use AI really effectively and actually excel in it, right? So versus folks that I don't need to be an expert in a field. I just need to know how to program, or I need how to use AI, right? You want to be an expert in a field. I think that's what I'm noticing.
Okay, so we have time for just one final short question that requires short answer. So I think the gentleman over here, the professor over here, has the final question.
Well, yeah, no, thank you so much. Try to be very, very quick. So we mentioned ethics. I would like to know your perspective also about the legal context. So what type of conversations, if I may ask, what type of conversations do you actually have with your legal teams in your companies? How do you engage with them? And do you think that the university, and I'm of course coming from the law school, how do you think that the university can contribute to also prepare better lawyers to actually assist more effectively with implementation of AI in different business sectors?
I can jump in on that. You know, we work with a lot of different organizations, everything from publicly traded companies to government agencies to large health systems, and it's all over the map right now. We've been watching this and tracking this for the last couple of years in terms of AI language creeping its way into our contracts and understanding what we can and can't do. We have been really challenged. We're passing through, in one case, and we're basically reselling one of the large LLMs from one of the biggest companies in the world to another one of the biggest companies in the world. And we are not one of the biggest companies in the world. But legally, we're carrying the risk, the liability of this OpenAI, our open model. So we struggle with that. We often start projects, and then legal will get involved, and they'll either put them on pause or they'll put them under review, because people in these organizations right now, they're not even aware of what legal concerns are going to come from their legal department in some cases until they're already through the contracting process. But of course, it's getting caught in contracting. We've seen cases where in big companies, we have a couple of lawyers review it and everything's fine, and then 3 weeks later, a different set of lawyers does it, and the exact same things get completely reversed. So it's very apparent to us from where we're sitting that there are no legal precedents for a lot of this stuff. It varies, not even company to company or industry to industry, but even within legal teams inside a company, they are taking different stances on liability for AI.
Emphasize what Jeff said. Guilty as charged at our company, and it's a frustrating point because we never know which path we're going to take, and often things escalate. And the way we're trying to tackle that, and maybe there's an opportunity for legal assistance here, is to try and create a standard set of contract packages that actually templatize the way we're thinking about how to do this. And we're doing this working in a sort of a tiger team approach with our legal team to try and come up with what are these things that we can do to streamline this judgment. Because sometimes we see, ridiculously long amount of time spent on things like licensing a developer tool that, the Fortune 500 company has 1 million licenses to, and we're negotiating the EULA. Like, why are we doing that, right? But then in other cases, big things where maybe they should pay a little more attention, they're not. So we're trying to figure out how to sort out, triage, and create sort of fast paths and regular ways of doing this. And it's pioneering work. We don't really know what we're doing.
I guess the one thing I would say is, so I personally, I don't work directly with the legal team, right? Because I build things and then I just send it to someone. I'll be like, hey, can you actually deal with it? Just so to me, I think the way we handle it internally before it gets to that process is that everything we do, we always focus on privacy, right, and security. So I think having a template of sort, that's probably the best way, right? Framework, framework, some kind of evaluation methods and things like that, typically are really valuable for like research lab like mine, where I'm in. So.
And I would just say it's a best practice both for ourselves and in our research to think about an integrated product team in an agile sense as you're developing. It's much better to have the lawyer in the integrated product team up front, helping than to have to go to the lawyer once the problem happens. That's not a recipe for success.
Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking the distinguished panel.
Thank you.